As you can see on this map of Israel, Beit Lechem, which is the burial place of Rachel, our matriarch, is literally 1.5 miles away from Yerushalayim. Just hours ago, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announced a groundbreaking report that starting now, the State Department will allow anyone who was born in Jerusalem to write on their passport, Jerusalem, Israel. Now, while this may seem obvious, actually, up until now, if you were born in Jerusalem, you cannot write Israel. You could only write Jerusalem. Why? Because according to the State Department, Jerusalem is a disputed territory, and therefore you cannot write Israel because it may not be Israel, it may be Palestinian territory. And how outrageous this is, because as we see, Jacob lived there with his wife Rachel going back 3,800 years ago. And today, that this announcement is being made on, is actually the 11th day of Cheshvan, the day of the yahrzeit of Rachel, our mother, and the day that she actually gave birth to her son Benjamin, because we know that she passed away during childbirth. Now, in 2015, a Jew who was born in Jerusalem brought the case to the Supreme Court that he demanded that his passport say Jerusalem, Israel. And the State Department ruled in favor of the Obama administration in 2015, saying that it's the executive branch's decision, and since the Obama administration refused to write Jerusalem, Israel, they could not have the word Israel on their passport. But following the Trump administration's move of the embassy in 2017, of the embassy from Tel Aviv to Yerushalayim, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, now the wrong has been righted once again, and going forward, or even retroactively, anyone who wants to update their passport can write the truth, which is obvious, that this is Jerusalem, Israel. In this week's Torah portion, we read the story of Avraham, the first Jew, being told by God, Lech Lecha, go to the land that I will show you, which was the land of Israel. And God says, walk this land to its width, to its breadth, and look to the east, to the west, to the north, and the south, because this entire land I will give to you. And indeed, 3,800 years later, the land of Israel is still in the possession of the Jewish people. Although we've been exiled multiple times, God has always brought us back to our homeland. And how ironic or fortuitous is that today, on the yahrzeit of Rachel, United States of America is recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of the state of Israel. You know, in the Oslo Accords, there was a consideration of giving away the tomb of Rachel, because Israel, in its sincere and desire and attempt to make peace with the Palestinians, offered to give the Palestinians 98% of the West Bank, and they gave them the city of Bethlehem, even though it's 1.5 miles away from Jerusalem. And they were going to give up the tomb of Rachel, which would have been disastrous, because we know what the Arabs would have done to the tomb of Rachel. They would have destroyed it, as they did to the tomb of Joseph when they received that in the territory of Shechem. They set it on fire. And it was Rabbi Israel Me'alau, Chief Rabbi of Israel, who went to plead with Yitzchak Rabin, who signed these accords, whose yahrzeit, his passing, tragically, his assassination, is tomorrow, on the 12th of Cheshvan. And Yitzchak Rabin was going to give away the entire Beit Lechem with the tomb of Rachel. And Rabbi Lau pleaded with Yitzchak Rabin, Prime Minister Rabin, and he said, Me'ima lo nifradim, you don't give away your mother. And he convinced Yitzchak Rabin, and that's why till today, although Bethlehem is an Arab territory, and it's an Arab village, the tomb of Rachel remains secured with high walls and security fences. And if you've been there, you know you go into this cinder-blocked walled area, and you can go, and thousands of people actually go every day and pray at the tomb of Rachel. And Rachel, the loving mother, beseeches God in heaven for her children. And from all the matriarchs, she's the one who's referred to as Mama Rachel, Mother Rachel, because of her love and her sacrifice, that she gave up her resting place in the tomb of Machpelah, the Marata Machpelah in Hebron, and was buried on the side of the road in Bethlehem. So when the Jews would be taken out of Jerusalem into exile by the Babylonians, they stopped 1.5 miles away from Jerusalem when the Babylonians exiled them 2,400 years ago, and they wept at the tomb of their mother Rachel. And the rabbis in the Talmud explain, based on the Haftorah that we read on Rosh Hashanah, that Rachel mevakal baneh, Rachel weeps for her children, and God says, I will answer your prayer, v'shavu banim l'gvulim, your children will go back to the borders of Israel. And this prophecy has been, and this promise from God to Rachel has been fulfilled multiple times. After the Babylonian destruction, the Roman destruction, and now in our generation after the Holocaust, v'shavu banim l'gvulim, the Jewish children, the children of Mother Rachel have come back to the land of Israel. And the Talmud says, why did Rachel merit that her prayers should be answered? And our rabbis say, because when Jacob wanted to marry Rachel, and Laban tricked him and gave the older sister Leah, Rachel did not want to humiliate and embarrass her older sister and remained silent as her father sent Leah instead of Rachel. And because of that love that she showed for her sister, God answered her prayer and promised her that the children of Israel will return to their borders. So what's fascinating about the Jewish people is that, what do we call Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Rachel and Leah? We call them our fathers and our mothers. We don't call them our pioneering, founding nation developers or the leaders of our nation. Every leader has a name. Moshe is Rabbeinu, our teacher. Eliyahu is Hanavi, our prophet. But our fathers and mothers are called Avot and Imaot, mothers and fathers. And when we start our prayers in the Shemona Esrei every day, we say the God of our father Abraham, Elokei Avraham, Isaac. We always talk about our patriarchs and matriarchs to remind us that we are their living flesh and blood. We are their continuity, and we have to carry on. And our love for them, as the word father, family stands for father and mother, I love you. We proclaim our love, not just to God, but to our patriarchs and our matriarchs. And the best demonstration of love for parents is our devotion to one another, because the greatest nachas, the greatest joy parents can get is when we love and support one another. That shows our family, mishpacha, our close-knit connection with one another. And I just want to tell you about a story that happened in Israel. It was an Israeli soldier who was leaving his army base for Shabbat to go home to his family. And he had his duffel bag full of laundry to take home for his mother to wash, and all of his belongings. And he stood on the side of the road to hitch a ride. An Israeli man came by and said, "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going in this direction." He said, "Come, I'll take you. I'm going there too." He threw his duffel bag in the back seat of the car and drove to the town. When he got there, to the city he was going to, the man driving him said, "Where do you want to go?" He said, "Just take me to the bus stop, I'll catch a bus home." He took him to the bus stop. When he dropped him off, he slammed the door, wished him Shabbat Shalom, and left to the bus. As soon as he pulled off, he realized that he left his duffel bag in the back seat of the car. The driver got home, he realized the duffel bag was there, and he looked at the name tag, and he called the Israeli soldier, and he said, "I have your duffel bag, you forgot to take it." He says, "Yeah, I realized, thank you for calling." He says, "How am I going to get it back to you?" So the Israeli driver said, "I'm going back on Sunday to my work in the opposite direction. When are you going to your army base?" He said, "I'm returning Sunday morning after Shabbat." He said, "I'll pick you up at the bus station, I'll take you to your army base, and I'll give you your duffel bag." So that's what they did. They met on Sunday morning, and sure enough, he drove him back to the army base. When he got out of the car, he thanked him, Shavua Tov, he wished him a good week. He took his duffel bag into the army base. And he was thinking, I'm going to have to recycle my dirty laundry for the next few weeks till I go home again. Because I got my duffel bag back, but my mother didn't get to wash my laundry. And when he got into the base, he opened up his duffel bag. And to his great surprise, he saw that all of his clothing was washed, folded, pressed neatly, and piled up in the duffel bag. And on the top, there was a bag of homemade cookies. And when he opened the cookies, there was a note in it. And it was from the wife of this man who gave him a lift. And she wrote, "Dear Chayal, thank you for letting me be your Ima for one day." This is what it means to be a mother. And to realize that we all have a mother, Rachel, and we all come from the same mothers and fathers, and therefore we're all family. And therefore we have to be mothers and fathers, not just to our own children, but to our fellow Jews as well. We are one family. And tomorrow, tragically, as we commemorate the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, we learn about what happens when Jews don't love and support one another, when they turn against each other. And the greatest pain and tragedy in Jewish history is, God forbid, when we harm one another. And looking in Israel today and seeing all the protests against the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, we have to stand up and speak out against it. Yes, there are elections and there are ways to change leadership if you're not happy, but antagonism and name-calling and, God forbid, rhetoric can lead to violence, as we've seen. And as Jews, we have to make sure that we never, God forbid, hurt one another, but as brothers and sisters from one mother and one father, we love and support each other. Have a wonderful day, and may the merit of Rachel be a blessing for all of her children, for the Jewish people everywhere.